Your son is pathetic and you raised him that way." The words popped up on my phone screen like a slap I could feel in my teeth. The blue glow of the group chat washed over my kitchen table, turning my coffee cold before I ever touched it. I stared at Brenda's message in the carpool group, her name sitting there in bold, as if she'd just walked into my kitchen and said it to my face. The little gray circle beside her bubble showed she was still typing. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't move. At 63, I thought I'd learned what to ignore. Clearly, I was wrong. Another bubble appeared, right under the first. "Maybe if your precious daughter-in-law spent less time trying to be independent and more time being a wife, he wouldn't show up in dirty shirts either." I could almost hear her voice, that nasal, superior tone she used at the Christmas potluck when she'd talked over me about how a real woman supports her man. I had smiled and refilled the spinach dip, pretending not to notice. Now there was no smiling, just the cold rectangle of my phone, the hum of the refrigerator, and the smell of burnt toast from a breakfast I'd already forgotten to finish. The group name at the top of the screen, Root Crew plus Spouses, mocked me in bright white letters. Little circles flashed as people read. No one said anything. No one told her to knock it off. Silence sat in the chat like a crowd watching a car accident. My son Michael hadn't seen it yet. His avatar, a blurry picture of him in his postal uniform, still had no little typing under it. I glanced at the time. He'd be sorting mail now, hands moving fast. Phone tossed into the metal locker that always smelled like dust and men's cologne. He wouldn't see any of this until his break. It had started so simply. 30 minutes earlier, his wife, Jenna, had written, "Hey, can anyone drop Michael home tonight? I'm stuck on a late shift and took the car. No worries if not." A coworker named Tyler answered right away. "Yeah, I got him. I'm heading past your street anyway." I'd smiled when I saw it. That chat had been a blessing during the pandemic. Rides, groceries, swapping masks when everyone ran short. I was in there because Michael didn't always have service on his route, and Jenna worked double shifts. Sometimes I coordinated pickups, texts, meals. It made me feel useful. Then Brenda slid in. "Maybe if you spent less time at work and more time being a wife, he wouldn't come in with those filthy shirts," she wrote. Just saying. I'd read it twice, sure I'd misunderstood. Michael walked all day in heat and dust. No washing machine in the world could make those uniforms look like office wear. Jenna always joked that the dirt was his badge of honor. Jenna hadn't taken it as a joke. "I could spend all day scrubbing those shirts and they'd still look like that, lol," she'd replied, trying to keep it light. I could hear the nervous laugh in that lol. I knew my daughter-in-law's voice like I knew the creak in my own knees. Brenda didn't stop. "You won't stay married long if you keep trying to be the man in the relationship," she wrote. "I'd be embarrassed as a wife if I did so little for my husband." The words crawled under my skin. I thought of Jenna coming home at midnight from the hospital, dropping her bag on my couch and going straight to the sink to wash Michael's uniforms anyway, eyes half closed from exhaustion. I thought of my son leaving at dawn with a thermos in his hand that I had filled because she'd been up until 3 charting patient notes. They did so little for each other. I wiped my palm on my jeans. My coffee mug left a faint brown ring on the table as I pushed it aside, the ceramic scraping softly in the quiet kitchen. Jenna replied again, faster this time. "Well, I work more hours and pay most of the bills, so I think he can handle some OxyClean if it bothers you that much," she added, the little laughing face. It looked like a bright sticker slapped on top of a bruise. Brenda pounced. "Maybe you should learn how to properly take care of your husband, or you'll end up divorced and alone sooner than you think." My jaw clenched. The oven clock ticked. Outside, a trash truck banged the bins against the curb, the crash echoing through the window. For a moment, I just sat there listening to the sound of something being emptied, something heavy and metal and final. That was when Brenda sent the line about my son, my boy. Pathetic. Raised him that way. My thumb finally moved. I tapped the text box, the blank white space blinking at me like it was daring me to step into the circle. I typed, then erased, typed again. For one long moment, my kitchen became another kind of silence. My breath held, my shoulders tight, the house listening with me. 63 years of swallowing comments, of choosing to be polite, lined up behind my teeth. I thought of Michael changing his last name to Jenna's. He'd called me the night they filed the paperwork, voice shaky but proud. "She's carried more weight than I have, Mom," he'd said. "Feels fair to wear her name for a while." I hadn't cared what anyone thought. I'd just been proud he'd married a woman who matched his stubborn streak in all the right ways. But his coworkers had turned it into a circus, half of them joking about him being whipped, the other half acting like he'd burned the flag. Brenda was leading the offended half. Of course she was. My fingers stopped hovering. They began to move. "Brenda," I wrote, "if my son is pathetic, it's strange how he still shows up to work every day in that filthy uniform while you sit in a group chat policing other women's marriages." I hit send before I could overthink it. The message appeared in blue, solid and irreversible. Those 3 dots popped up under Brenda's name again, then vanished, then appeared, like she was pacing in a room I couldn't see. Tyler inserted a nervous little, and then deleted it. His message removed notice sat there like a cough no one acknowledged. I wasn't done. 63 or not, I knew when someone needed to be told to sit down. "And as for my daughter-in-law," I typed, hands steadier now, "she's at the hospital 12 hours a day keeping strangers alive while you criticize how often she runs a washing machine. She pays the bills and still makes time to pack his lunch. I think they're doing just fine without your standards." My heart thudded in my ears. I could almost feel the entire group chat leaning closer to their phones, reading. In the reflection of the dark microwave door, I caught a glimpse of myself. Gray hair pinned back, reading glasses low on my nose, face sharper than I usually let it be. The 3 dots under Brenda's name flashed again. I could picture her at her desk, lips pursed, energy coiling like a snake. Her reply came. "Wow, so now the whole family is ganging up on me. I'm just trying to give some advice so your son doesn't end up alone. But what would you know about being a real wife when you raised a man who lets his hotshot breadwinner walk all over him?" Real wife. Breadwinner. Walk all over him. I thought of the years I'd worked 2 jobs after my husband left, of the nights I'd come home and stitched Michael's jeans by the yellow kitchen light while he slept. I thought of Jenna dropping off lasagna at my door when my arthritis flared, shyly asking if it was seasoned the way I liked, and then the part Brenda had been waiting to say all along. "Honestly, if you'd done your job as a mother, maybe your son wouldn't be okay with being emasculated like this. But hey, enjoy watching their marriage fall apart. Some people have to learn the hard way." The phone felt heavier in my hand. The blue light on my skin turned colder, like I was standing under a street lamp in winter. No one else wrote a word. Not Tyler, not the other spouses. Just the silent row of names watching this woman tell me I had failed my son, that his marriage would crumble, that Jenna's independence was a disease. My thumb hovered one more time. The air in my kitchen seemed to thicken, every sound fading except the faint ticking of the clock. This silence was different from the others. It stretched. Taut and painful, the kind of pause where you decide who you are going to be from this moment on. Then I wrote the sentence that ripped the air open. "When I need relationship advice, Brenda, I'll ask someone who isn't 42 and still single." I pressed send and watched the message slide into the thread, bright and unblinking, as the group chat exploded into the kind of silence that says everyone just saw something they will be talking about for a very, very long time. The notification tone broke the quiet in my kitchen like a fork dropped on tile. One message, then another, then the gray ellipsis blinking under Brenda's name, vanishing, returning, dancing like agitation made visible. No one else dared to type. I didn't move from my chair. My hands rested flat on the table, the worn wood warm beneath my palms. The overhead light cast a dull yellow over everything, and for a moment I felt as if I were sitting on a stage, waiting for the next blow. Brenda finally replied, "So that's who you are, age-shaming other women. What a great example of motherhood." The accusation hung there, sticky and smug. A few coworkers reacted with the small, meaningless emojis people choose when they want to say something without taking a side. A thumbs up, a neutral face, a weak attempt at humor from someone who quickly deleted it. None of it softened the sting. My phone buzzed again before I could catch my breath. "Honestly," she continued, "it explains a lot about your family dynamic. No wonder your son let his wife strip him of his last name. Weakness runs deep." Weakness. The word slid under my skin like a splinter. I felt a sharp pull inside my chest. The instinct to respond rising quickly, almost reflexively, but I made myself stay still. I knew better than to fire back too fast. Women my age spend a lifetime learning the cost of quick tempers. The world always watches our reactions more carefully than the cruelty that triggers them. A chair scraped faintly outside my window, my neighbor dragging her patio seat into place for her morning coffee. Even that ordinary sound made me flinch. I took a slow breath and exhaled, pushing my shoulders back, grounding myself in the steady rhythm of my own lungs. Then Tyler wrote something that made the quiet feel heavier. "Maybe we should take this off the group chat? This space is for rides only." But he didn't tag Brenda. He didn't name the person who crossed the line. His words floated there, soft and vague, like a warning whispered to the wrong person. Brenda replied instantly, "Oh, I'm sorry, Tyler. I didn't realize defending the institution of marriage was off topic now. My bad." She added a smiling emoji, the kind with too many teeth. Something tightened in my throat. It felt like watching a crowded room pretend not to see a man shove someone. Eyes slide away, excuses take shape, responsibility dissolves like sugar on a tongue. Then the message that shifted the air even more. "Maybe we should add the managers to the chat," Brenda wrote, "if certain people are going to be unprofessional and hostile." The threat landed with a thud in my stomach. Not fear, not really. Just the sick familiarity of someone trying to weaponize authority when they feel cornered. I'd seen that tactic used on me at jobs decades ago. Women like Brenda relied on it like oxygen. I typed nothing. I didn't trust the heat in my fingers. A spouse named Marie finally stepped in. "I think things got personal. Maybe everyone should cool down." But she aimed the comment at the room, not the source. Another soft cushion placed around the real fire so no one had to admit they smelled smoke. Brenda seized the opportunity. Exactly. Some people clearly can't handle mature conversation. A mature conversation. From the woman who'd just told me I'd raised a pathetic son. My jaw ached from clenching. A thin line of light cut across the table as the sun pushed through the blinds, turning my cold coffee into a shallow pool of bronze. The warmth didn't touch me. Another message appeared, this time from Jenna herself. "I'm not interested in arguing, guys. I asked for a ride for my husband, not a character evaluation." Her attempt at calm was brave. I knew her well enough to hear the tremble under the words. She was someone who tried to keep peace even when others didn't deserve her gentleness. Brenda pounced on her again. "If you want to play strong, independent woman, go ahead. Just don't drag your husband and his family into your mess. Some of us actually value traditional marriage." I stared at the screen, feeling something rare for me, a deep, pressing mix of anger and disappointment. Not just in Brenda, in the silent names watching this unfold like an afternoon show. My fingers hovered above the keys again, slow, measured. I typed, "Traditional marriage has survived worse than a name change. What it doesn't survive is bitterness." Before I could hit send, another message flashed into the chat from Michael. He must have stepped out for a break. His words appeared fast, jagged, like he'd been reading in real time for minutes before deciding to respond. "Brenda, Don't talk about my wife or my mother like that. Short. Controlled. A man trying not to start a war. Brenda replied within seconds. Oh, look, the husband finally shows up. Maybe if your wife respected you, you'd defend yourself without needing backup. A new silence spread through the chat, different from the earlier curious quiet. This one felt cold and sharp, as if everyone sensed a line had finally been crossed, but still no one stepped forward. The ellipsis blinked under Michael's name, disappeared, blinked again. He was angry enough to be shaking. I knew it without seeing him. He'd inherited that from me. Before he could reply, I typed something else. Brenda, I wrote slowly. This conversation is no longer about shirts, chores, or traditions. It's about the way you talk to people who haven't provoked you. The typing dots appeared again under her name, then vanished, then returned. I added, and before you say anything else, remember that silence can reveal more about a person's character than any insult. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Just those gray dots. Just the sense that she was choosing her next strike with care. Then her message appeared. I'm not done with this conversation. Some of us don't look the other way when we see dysfunction. I'll say what needs to be said, even if none of you appreciate it. Her confidence. Her certainty that she held some kind of moral authority, it made my skin prickle. She wasn't withdrawing. She wasn't embarrassed. She was gathering herself for something worse, something pointed, something she planned to make public. I felt it coming before the next message appeared. I think we should have a real talk about what's wrong in this family dynamic, she wrote, and I'm prepared to bring it up with the higher-ups if no one else will. My breath caught, suspended in a tight, unforgiving stillness. She was shifting the battlefield, and I knew the next blow she aimed wouldn't be confined to a group chat. The past has a way of drifting back at the exact moment you wish it would stay quiet. As Brenda's threats echoed in my mind, the kitchen around me seemed to blur. Yellow light softening, clock ticking slower. Everything folding inward until I was left holding memories I hadn't touched in years. They rose carefully, like old photographs lifted from a box you once sealed too tightly. I leaned back in my chair, letting my spine settle into its familiar curve. The phone still lay in front of me, but I wasn't watching it anymore. My thoughts were drifting far from the pressure of that group chat and the harsh glow of the screen. I remembered the smell of bleach and warm cotton, the scent of every night I spent washing uniforms when Michael was young. Not the crisp white of office shirts, but the navy blue overalls he'd worn to his first job at 17, sweeping out the loading docks behind the hardware store. He used to come home covered in sawdust and splinters of cardboard, hands raw from lifting boxes twice the size of his chest. I'd sit at the table patching the knees of those overalls while he ate leftovers straight from the pot. There was never enough money back then. I can still see the tan envelope pinned to the fridge with a magnet that said, "Bless this mess." Inside it each week were the bills I had to pay. Electric, water, rent, the $27 we owed the mechanic for tightening the alternator on our dying sedan. The envelope always felt thicker than my wallet. I'd spread those papers across the table and trace the numbers with my thumb, trying to stretch each dollar like I stretched the fabric in Michael's sleeves. Still, we managed. Somehow, we managed. The nights were quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the way the wind slipped through the cracked window above the sink. We didn't have air conditioning then. Summer heat clung to our skin so tightly that the sheets on Michael's bed stuck to his back. He'd fall asleep with his feet at the wrong end of the mattress because that side felt less hot. I'd watch him breathe, soft and steady, and tell myself everything would turn out fine if I just kept moving. I learned to sew torn pockets, unclog drains, replace the fuse in the breaker box. I kept spare change in a jar labeled rainy days, though it often ended up covering groceries before rain ever fell. Every small act felt like placing stones on a path only I could see, hoping it led to something better. Michael grew taller, then leaner, then stronger. The year he turned 20, he took 2 jobs, mornings at the same hardware store, evenings stocking shelves at a grocery called Glenwood Market. He left the house at dawn and came home smelling of dust and citrus cleaner. His shoes always wore out faster than we could afford to replace them. One evening, after a 12-hour day, he collapsed into a kitchen chair and said, "I think I want something steadier, Mom. Something that won't disappear if the store changes managers." He said it quietly, almost ashamed, as though wanting stability was a luxury he hadn't earned. That was when he applied for the Postal Service. I still remember the day the letter arrived. The envelope was stiff, official, with the eagle embossed in dark ink. When Michael opened it, the look on his face, half disbelief, half relief, made the room feel bigger. I hugged him so tightly he pretended to complain, but I felt the way he rested his chin briefly on my shoulder. Just a second. Just long enough for me to feel that he knew how hard we had fought to get here. When he bought his first set of uniforms, the fabric felt crisp and stiff in my hands. Too new for a boy who'd spent his whole life wearing clothes with creases earned from use, not from packaging. I washed those uniforms on cold water, let them hang dry so the colors wouldn't fade too fast, and pressed them with the old iron I'd inherited from my mother. I wasn't good at ironing. The steam always rose in strange shapes, like clouds that refused to settle, but I did it anyway. Those were the years when mornings tasted like burnt toast and instant coffee. Michael's thermos rattled against the counter as he filled it before heading out. He'd kiss my cheek, quick and grateful, and promise to pick up groceries on the way home. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was ours. I heard his footsteps change over time, from hurried to confident, from uncertain to steady. Work mattered to him. Showing up mattered. Doing right by others mattered. That's why Brenda's comments hit harder than she realized. She didn't know the boy who carried home half-melted popsicles he'd been given at work so he could share them with me before they turned to syrup. She didn't know the man who delivered mail through storms, through blistering heat, through the kind of exhaustion that makes your whole body ache. She didn't know the years when he kept us afloat as I struggled with arthritis so sharp it turned doors into mountains. She saw a name change and dirty shirts. I saw the decades in between. And then there was the day he met Jenna. I remember it so clearly because of the way he walked into my house afterward. Quiet at first, then smiling into his hands like he didn't trust himself to show too much. I'd made chicken soup. He sat at the table, lifting the spoon to his lips slowly, eyes drifting somewhere warm and distant. "She's something else," he'd said. He didn't need to explain. Kindness has a scent, and Jenna carried it with her. I smelled it the first evening she joined us for dinner. The faint lavender lotion on her hands, the soft detergent woven into her scrubs. She treated my son with the kind of tenderness I prayed he'd find one day. Not softness, tenderness. There's a difference. The first time she folded his uniforms, she did it badly. The creases were uneven, a little crooked. She laughed about it, embarrassed. Michael told her they looked perfect. Later, I found them refolded on the couch, neatly, carefully, her perfectionism nudging her long after the joke had passed. And when Michael told me he wanted to take her last name, it felt like watching 2 threads tie themselves together without hesitation. He didn't do it for politics or performance. He did it because he admired her strength. He did it because love, at its best, is not about tradition. It's about balance. Brenda didn't know any of that, but I did. And those memories sat with me now, warm and heavy, like stones in my lap, each one a testament to everything she dismissed with a single sneer. My phone buzzed again. The vibration rattled against the table, a sharp reminder that the present was waiting, demanding, ready to intrude. But before I reached for it, something inside me shifted. Not resolve, not anger, just a quiet reminder of all the years that led us here. Because no matter what Brenda was preparing to do next, I had lived through far worse storms than this. And storms always reveal something. Always. The message waiting on my phone was short, but something in its clipped tone made the air in my kitchen feel colder. "I've spoken to a few people," Brenda wrote, "and I think it's time we address the toxicity coming from your side of the family. Your side of the family, as if my son, my daughter-in-law, and I were some defective branch she'd discovered too late." My thumb tightened around the phone. The sunlight across the table had shifted from warm gold to a muted gray, fading as clouds dragged themselves over the sky. The room dimmed in a way I felt in my chest, more than in my eyes. I told myself to breathe. Just breathe. But the inhale snagged halfway, thin and unsteady, like my lungs weren't sure they wanted to cooperate. Brenda kept typing. "It's becoming clear that some people don't respect proper roles, and it's affecting morale in the workplace." Morale. Proper roles. Clear. Words that pretended to be professional while carrying the sting of something far more personal. I set the phone down, letting it rest against the grain of the table. I needed a second, a moment where the room wasn't tilting under the weight of someone else's righteous cruelty. But silence didn't help. It only spread wider, circling me with everything unsaid. Outside, a car door slammed. A dog barked twice. The normal sounds of my street slipped under the doorframe, muted but insistent, reminding me of a world that kept moving even when someone's words tried to pin me in place. The phone buzzed again. "Also," Brenda added, "I've been told that your daughter-in-law bragging about paying bills is emasculating to your son and damaging to the workplace environment." My stomach tightened. She wasn't just throwing insults now. She was rewriting the story. That was her power. That was always the power of people like her. Not the truth, but the shaping of it. The casting of shadows until others questioned what they already knew. I picked up the phone again, but before I could reply, another message arrived. And frankly, if he wasn't raised to be so passive, maybe he wouldn't let himself be walked over by a wife who refuses to respect him. The cruelty of that sentence landed in my chest with a dull, heavy thud. For a few seconds, all I could do was stare at the screen, my breath shallow. The edges of my vision tightening just a little. Years of effort, sacrifice, and survival, flattened into a single insult by someone who barely knew him, someone who didn't know me at all. My hand trembled, just once, a small, traitorous tremor that I forced still by pressing my palm flat to the table. I wasn't going to let her see me falter, not even in my own mind. The 3 dots appeared again under her name. She wasn't finished. She sent another message before anyone could react. Honestly, I'm concerned for him. Men don't thrive when their wives take over everything and treat them like children. It's sad, really. Sad, concern, thrive. Each word turned my ribs tighter. I knew what she was doing, layering her messages with just enough concern to twist the knife while claiming moral high ground. Emotional cruelty dressed as guidance. Social cruelty disguised as honesty, silent cruelty in the pauses between. A few coworkers liked her message, not many, but enough to make something warm inside me cool into something else, something quieter, harder. My pulse thudded in my wrists. My chest rose and fell in small, measured movements. I tried to hold on to the thread of calm I'd gathered in Phase 3, but Brenda's words tugged at it relentlessly. My phone buzzed once more. "And to top it off, I hear your daughter-in-law insulted me for being single in my 40s. I will not tolerate age-based harassment. I expect accountability." Accountability. The words scraped against the inside of my throat as if she were scraping something off a plate and asking people to pretend it was food. She was preparing her case, building it line by line, turning herself into the victim with each carefully chosen phrase. I held the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. Another message. If this is how he was raised to handle conflict, no wonder he ended up in such an unhealthy marriage. That one landed differently, softer at first, then sharper, spreading slowly under the skin. A deliberate cruelty crafted from pieces she knew would pierce deepest. She was attacking how he was raised, how I raised him. I felt something in me sink, not breaking, not yet, but lowering into a place where the light didn't reach. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was the kind that thickened the air, pressing against my temples, wrapping around my throat like invisible hands. A new message appeared, but it wasn't from Brenda. It was from Marie. "Brenda, maybe just take a break. You've said enough." The message was gentle, careful, padded with soft edges. Brenda snapped back instantly. "I haven't said enough if disrespect is still happening. Some people need lessons. They don't learn otherwise." A lesson. That's what she thought she was giving us. I felt my breath catch again, but this time it stayed there, stuck, refusing to move. I placed a hand against my sternum, trying to coax air forward. It came in small portions, thin, uneven. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not long, just enough to steady the shaking I wouldn't show. When I opened them, the phone buzzed once more. This time, Brenda sent a screenshot, a cropped version of the chat, Jenna's sentence about paying bills, my line about her being 42 and single, stripped of context, arranged deliberately. She added, "I think management will want to see this." The hum in my ears grew louder, vibrating softly behind my eyes. Suddenly, the room felt smaller. The walls edged closer. The light above me flickered once, casting a brief shadow across the table. My hand trembled again, this time for longer. And as the phone vibrated one more time, a cold understanding slid through me. Brenda wasn't just angry. She wasn't offended. She was preparing to make this into something far, far larger than a spat in a chat room. She was preparing to make it public. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it right away. I couldn't. My breath still felt thin in my chest, like the air itself had narrowed. The kitchen lights hummed softly above me, an old fluorescent flicker I usually ignored. Today it felt like another voice pressing in. I closed my eyes only for a moment, letting the stillness settle just enough for my pulse to slow. I'd lived through harder years, lonely ones, hungry ones where bills stacked into small mountains on the table. But something about this, about a stranger twisting my family into her theater, felt like being pushed toward the edge of an old wound. I finally turned the phone over. More messages from Brenda, one after another, relentless. "I'm collecting everything. I'll escalate this if I have to. People like you don't get to bully others without consequences. People like you, not you. People like you." She was building a category, a box to shove us into, so she could set it on fire and insist it was righteous work. My thumb hovered over the screen, but before I could react, a new message arrived, this time from someone who rarely spoke. Jared. "I think Brenda's right. This chat isn't for drama. Maybe certain spouses shouldn't be here if they can't behave professionally." Professionally. Spouses shouldn't be here. He didn't mention names. He didn't have to. A heat rose under my skin, not hot like anger, but warm like humiliation. A different kind of burn, a quiet one. Jenna saw it too. She wrote, "I didn't bully anyone. I responded to insults. Brenda, you attacked my marriage, my work ethic, my role in my own home." Brenda sent back a single line, "Defensiveness says everything." The group fell silent again, not neutral or confused, just watchful, waiting to see who would bend first. I set my phone down gently. The motion felt deliberate, like placing a fragile thing where it couldn't break further. A small thought surfaced, one I didn't want, one I tried to bat away. Maybe this is what she wants, not the argument, the damage. Maybe she enjoyed pulling threads until a family unraveled. I pressed a hand against my sternum again. My breath eased out slowly, shakily, like air escaping a balloon someone held too tightly. And then, something happened that I did not expect. My phone buzzed not with another notification from the chat, but with a private message, a name I hadn't seen in months, Michelle. A coworker of Michael's from years back, someone steady, someone observant, someone who never got tangled in petty rivalries. Her message was short. You need to know something. My body went still, caught mid-breath. Another message came through. Brenda has been talking about your family for weeks, long before today. A coldness slid across my shoulders, down my spine. She's been telling people Michael is weak, that he made a mistake in who he married, that your family is troubled. That last word pulsed like a bruise. Troubled. Michelle continued. She does this. She picks a target and pushes until they react. Then she plays the victim. She's done it before. My fingers tightened around the phone. Another message. I didn't want to get involved, but she's escalating too fast. She's planning something bigger. Something bigger. The room seemed to tilt just slightly, as if the floor itself had taken a breath. Michelle's final message read, if you or Jenna react again, she'll use it. She wants a collapse so she can look righteous. I stared at the words until they blurred. And suddenly, quietly, something inside me settled. It wasn't hope. It wasn't relief. It was clarity, like dust settling after a long, violent shake. Brenda wasn't chaotic. She was methodical. She wanted a spectacle. She wanted to break something so she could parade the pieces, and I had given her too much room. My heart was still beating fast, but no longer out of fear. My breaths weren't smooth, but they were steadier. A line inside me, thin but firm, had reappeared. Michelle's last message echoed again in my mind. She wants a collapse so she can look righteous. No, she wouldn't get that. Not from me, not from my son, not from Jenna. I picked up my phone and opened the group chat. Not to fight, not to plead, not to justify, but because something in me had shifted direction entirely, pulled taut toward a different future. One where Brenda wouldn't hold the strings, one where this wasn't the beginning of our shame, but the moment I finally saw what needed to be done. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, and then the realization sharpened fully, like stepping into clean air after hours of smoke. This wasn't a battle to fight publicly. This was a pattern to expose, quietly, carefully, completely, before Brenda even knew what was coming. Michelle's messages stayed on my screen long after she stopped typing. They glowed softly in the dim light of my kitchen, quiet but sharp, like a truth I had needed someone to hand me. I reread them twice, not because I doubted her, but because every line seemed to pull a new thread loose in my understanding of the past weeks. Brenda wasn't lashing out. She was constructing something. And if she'd been preparing her version of events piece by piece, then I needed to do the same, just not in the way she expected. I stood slowly from the table. My knees cracked softly, reminding me of my age, reminding me of a different kind of strength. There's something about being a woman in her 60s. You learn that storms don't require panic. They require preparation. I poured out the cold coffee in the sink. The scent of bitter grounds rose briefly, mixing with the faint citrus cleaner I'd used the night before. Even the air felt more focused somehow, more pointed. I washed the mug gently, then set it upside down on the drying rack. One small task completed. One breath steadied. Then I picked up my phone and began, not typing, not responding, collecting. I scrolled back through the group chat, careful and slow, capturing screenshots, timestamps, context, every line Brenda twisted, every insinuation she layered onto the last. I made sure to include her early comments, the ones she'd conveniently omitted from the cropped version she planned to weaponize. Her concern, her moralizing, her accusations about my son's upbringing, not to retaliate, not to embarrass her, to protect my family. As I worked, the clouds outside shifted, letting in a thin band of cool light that slid across the counter like a silver ribbon. My reflection in the darkened microwave door looked more composed than I felt. Chin set, mouth firm, eyes weary but alert. A text popped up from Jenna privately. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this. I feel like I made everything worse." I tapped her name, typed slowly. "You didn't make any of this, sweetheart. She did." A pause. Then Jenna replied, "I keep thinking, if I just ignored her, maybe she would have stopped." Another message followed almost instantly. "But she wouldn't have, right?" I let out a soft breath, the kind that folds into your chest more than it escapes. "No," I wrote simply. "She wouldn't have." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. She was emotional. I felt it even through the screen. Before she could apologize again, I added, "We're going to handle this, quietly, thoughtfully. Let me take the lead for now." She sent a single reply. "Okay, I trust you." The weight of that trust settled gently on me, warm and solid. I turned back to the group chat. Brenda hadn't posted in several minutes. Maybe she thought her last message had delivered enough force to leave us scrambling. Maybe she was already drafting an email to management about unprofessional spouses and hostile environments. Fine, let her write it. I had another task. I opened a new notes folder on my phone and began organizing the information. Brenda's first unprovoked comment, the escalation, her targeted insults toward my son, the attacks on Jenna's marriage, work ethic, and roles, her threats to involve management, the cropped screenshots she manipulated, Jared's enabling message. Piece by piece, I was assembling clarity. The truth was simple, but truth rarely protects itself. Then, quietly, I added a line at the bottom of the note, pattern of behavior, because Michelle's messages had opened a door I'd never walked through before. If Brenda had done this to others, there were records, small ones, faded ones, whispered ones, but records nonetheless. I texted Michelle again. "Do you know who else she targeted?" The response came faster this time. "Yes, 2 people. I'll send what I have." A moment later, my phone buzzed with screenshots, older ones from a year ago. Brenda attacking another woman about her competence, then later accusing a man of harassment when he confronted her accusation. Both threads ended the same way. The coworker withdrawing, management placating, Brenda untouched. This wasn't spontaneous. It was a cycle, and cycles could be documented. I thanked Michelle, then opened an email draft, not to send yet, but to fill slowly with the facts. I copied the relevant screenshots, added dates, added context, wrote a clear, calm explanation of the events, nothing emotional, nothing reactive, just truth lined up thoughtfully, deliberately. Because when the time came, I wanted to speak in a voice that held weight, not anger, not fear, just the steadiness of someone who had lived enough life to know that justice doesn't always erupt loudly. Sometimes it unfolds like a door quietly swinging open. The draft wasn't ready yet. There were still pieces missing, people to speak with, details to confirm, but the foundation was forming. Before returning to the chat, I stepped away from my phone long enough to rinse my hands under cool water. It steadied me. The icy slip of it over my fingers grounded something frayed inside my chest. When I sat down again, a new message had appeared in the group chat, from Brenda. "I assume the silence means you're reflecting on your behavior." Reflecting. I let out a small, tired breath. Not a laugh, not disbelief, just recognition. Yes, Brenda. I was reflecting, just not in the way she imagined. I didn't reply. Not yet, not here. This space wasn't hers to moderate or mine to react in. Instead, I scrolled once more through the full thread, measuring the rhythm of her hostility, examining the tone she used when she believed she was winning. Every line told me something. Every pause told me more. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from someone I hadn't expected. "Tyler, Hey, I don't want to get in the middle, but what Brenda's doing isn't okay. If you need someone to back up what actually happened, I will. I stared at the message for a long moment, not because it shocked me, but because it added another piece to the gentle architecture forming in my mind. Support wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It just needed to exist. Thank you, I wrote back. I may reach out soon. And I would, but not before I was fully ready. I set my phone down again. The room was quiet except for the faint click of the fridge cycling on. The window above the sink was streaked with the thin remnants of earlier clouds, the light slowly returning, still muted but present. There was a long road ahead, evidence to gather, patterns to outline, people to speak with, a case to assemble, not of aggression but of clarity. Brenda wanted a collapse, but what she didn't know was that I'd spent my whole life learning to rebuild from pieces. This wouldn't be an explosion. It would be a steady unveiling, one she couldn't predict. And as I reached for my phone again, the faint vibration in my chest was no longer fear. It was certainty. The morning of the meeting arrived with a thin, gray light that made everything look colder than it was. I'd barely slept, though not from fear. My mind had been moving in quiet, steady circles through the night, arranging facts into place and smoothing the rough edges of emotion into something firmer. By 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with the notification Michael had forwarded me. Brenda has requested a formal discussion with management regarding behavior in the group chat. Please attend at noon. Requested, not suggested, not proposed. Requested. She wanted a stage. Fine, she would have one, but not the performance she envisioned. I left my house early, arriving at the postal office's small conference room before they had even set out the water pitcher. The fluorescent lights cast a sharp white glow across the long table, the kind of light that made paper look bleached and faces look honest or dishonest with equal efficiency. I sat at the far end. My hands rested lightly on my folder, a simple manila one, filled with neatly organized screenshots, dates, and statements. Nothing inflammatory, nothing emotional, just the truth lined up in clean, orderly lines. People filtered in slowly, the supervisor, a couple of department leads, Brenda's friend Jared, and finally Brenda herself. She walked in with a confidence that nearly glimmered. Chin high, steps crisp, expression composed with the faint shine of someone who believed her victory was a foregone conclusion. She did not acknowledge me directly. She placed her own folder on the table with a theatrical little thud, as if its contents might already convict an entire household. Michael entered last. He sat beside me, his jaw tight, his hands folded carefully in front of him. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His quiet was its own declaration. The supervisor began. Everyone, thanks for coming. We're here to discuss concerns raised regarding the group carpool chat. Brenda, since you requested the meeting, you can start. She wasted no time. She opened her folder and slid a few papers across the table, cropped screenshots of the chat, printed and highlighted in bright yellow, only the parts she wanted them to see. As you can see, she said, her voice crisp, I was subjected to personal attacks and age-related insults from Michael's family. This created an unsafe and hostile environment. Her eyes flicked to me briefly, sharp, triumphant. Particularly, she continued, the comment about my relationship status was derogatory and unprofessional. The room was very still. Even the hum of the HVAC seemed to quiet itself, listening. She began to speak again, and I believe it reflects deeper issues with... That's incomplete, I said. My voice cut through the room, not loud, not forceful, but clear. Brenda's shoulders stiffened. A small tremor twitched under her eye. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I simply reached into my folder and slid a printed page forward, placing it beside Brenda's cropped screenshot. Her own words sat above mine. Full context. The insults, the accusations, the threats, the moralizing. Every line she'd sent before I ever mentioned her age. The supervisor leaned forward. Is this the full thread? Yes, I said. Chronological, unedited, complete. Brenda lunged for the papers, her fingers stiff, but the supervisor lifted a hand gently, halting her. We'll all have a chance to read. She froze mid-motion, her mouth tightening. I continued. I understand that my comment about her age was inappropriate. I own that. But it didn't come from nowhere. It came after hours of targeted hostility toward my son and my daughter-in-law. Brenda scoffed under her breath, a thin, sharp sound. I turned to the next page. And this, I said, sliding it across, is the part of the conversation she removed. The supervisor took it first. His eyes moved across the lines, Brenda accusing Jenna of being a bad wife, of doing so little for her husband, of damaging her marriage, of being the man in the relationship, of needing to take proper care of him, of ensuring she'd be divorced soon. Brenda began to speak, but her supervisor raised a hand again. Please let her finish. She pressed her lips shut, red coloring her cheeks. I lifted the next sheet. And here, I said, are her statements about my son's upbringing, claiming he's weak, passive, and that I failed as a mother. A soft murmur moved across the room. Even Jared shifted in his chair, no longer quite as rigidly aligned with her. And here, I said, sliding another page, are her threats to involve management before she ever filed a complaint. And here are her claims about proper roles and traditional marriage, and her belief that Jenna's independence was emasculating my son. More sheets, more truth, more clarity. Each page was a stone placed neatly beside the last, a pathway anyone could follow. Brenda's breathing grew uneven, not loud but strained, like someone trying not to gasp in a quiet church. Then I placed one last sheet in the center of the table. This, I said softly, is from a separate conversation, sent to me by a coworker who witnessed previous incidents with Brenda. It shows a pattern. The supervisor's head lifted slightly. A pattern of what? He asked. Targeting, I said. Escalation, public humiliation, creating conflict and then filing complaints about the reaction. Brenda's eyes shot wide. That's a lie, she snapped. You're all conspiring. This is twisted. I never... She stopped abruptly when she realized no one was nodding. No one was rushing to reassure her. Even Jared was staring at the table now, silent. I looked directly at her for the first time since the meeting began. You said I raised my son poorly, I said quietly. You said my daughter-in-law was failing as a wife. You mocked their marriage, their roles, their choices, and their livelihoods. The room held its breath. And the moment someone pointed out your own choices, I finished, you decided to set fire to the entire room. Brenda sat back in her chair, as if the air had pushed her there. Her face had drained of certainty. Something unsteady flickered through her expression. Anger mixed with dawning recognition that the story she'd written was no longer the one being read. The supervisor gathered the papers slowly, stacking them neatly, weighing the evidence in his hands. We will need to review all of this carefully, he said. But based on what I see, the issue is far broader than a single remark, and not in the way the complaint suggested. Brenda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her silence filled the room more loudly than words could have. The supervisor looked at Michael next. You and your family have shown more restraint here than most would under the circumstances. Michael nodded once, his jaw unclenched. Then the supervisor turned to Brenda. I think it's best if you step out for a moment while we discuss next steps. Her chair scraped sharply against the floor, a harsh sound, brittle and exposed. She stood stiffly, one hand gripping her folder, knuckles white, and left the room without a word. The closing door echoed through the space like a verdict. But the moment that froze the room, the one that shifted the power so completely I felt it in my bones, wasn't her departure. It was the look on everyone's faces as the door clicked shut. Not confusion, not neutrality, recognition. They finally saw her. All at once. The door clicked shut behind Brenda, and the room released a sigh so soft it barely existed. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum more quietly, as if relieved the tension had stepped out with her. Michael sat beside me, shoulders lowered for the first time all morning. I didn't touch his hand. I didn't need to. The stillness between us was its own kind of support. The supervisor gathered the papers into a neat stack, aligning the corners carefully. That small act told me everything. People who are preparing to dismiss something do it sloppily. People who understand the weight of what they've been handed take their time. He looked at me, then at Michael. "I want to apologize," he said. "This should never have escalated this far. You both deserved better from this environment." I nodded once, slow, letting the words settle without letting them sink too deeply. Apologies are meaningful, but they don't undo bruises. They only acknowledge their shape. Another manager leaned forward. "We'll be documenting Brenda's behavior formally, and the pattern you provided, that concerns us. We'll follow up with those involved." His voice was steady, professional, but his eyes held something gentler, something like regret. I didn't want punishment. I wanted clarity. And clarity, finally, was here. Michael exhaled softly beside me. "Thank you," he said, voice low. The meeting ended quietly. No victory lap, no dramatic closure. Just the simple closing of folders, the scraping of chairs, and the soft shuffle of people returning to their day, carrying a truth they couldn't unsee. When we stepped outside, the winter light had softened into the kind of pale gold that makes everything appear momentarily kinder. Michael stopped beside me on the sidewalk, running a hand over his jaw. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. "I am," I said, and I meant it. We walked to the parking lot together. A breeze moved across the pavement, carrying the faint scent of pine from the landscaping near the entrance. It reminded me briefly of all the mornings I'd stood waiting for him at the bus stop when he was small, the cold seeping through our jackets, his breath fogging the air. Some things don't change. A mother worries. A mother protects. But today, something had changed. Not in him. In me. Years of swallowing comments, years of nodding through discomfort, years of choosing silence because silence was easier. All of it felt like a skin I no longer needed. Not loudness, not aggression, just a steadiness I had earned slowly, through long seasons of surviving harder things than a woman named Brenda. When Michael hugged me goodbye, his arms wrapped around me with a quiet understanding, not gratitude, not pity, just recognition. He knew what today meant. I watched him walk toward his car, shoulders squared, steps sure. My phone buzzed, a text from Jenna. "Is it over?" "For us," I wrote back. "Yes." She sent a simple heart, then another message. "Thank you for protecting us." I smiled faintly, standing in the soft sunlight, letting the moment unfold without rushing it. The truth was, I hadn't done anything extraordinary. I had simply refused to let someone rewrite our story. The next day, word reached us, quietly, discreetly, that Brenda had been removed from the group chat. A separate HR review had been opened. She wasn't fired, but she wasn't untouched either. Her behavior had consequences, not revenge, just accountability. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it simply closes a door behind someone and refuses to reopen it. Life settled. The chat returned to normal. Rides arranged, reminders shared, little jokes passed around without malice. The silence Brenda left behind felt different. Not tense, not watchful. Clean. A week later, Jenna stopped by my house after her shift. She smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender lotion. Her shoulders looked lighter. "We're doing okay," she said, leaning against my counter. "Better than okay, actually." "I never doubted you would," I told her. She hesitated, then added softly, "I'm glad I'm part of this family." I reached for her hand. Not a dramatic gesture. Just the warm touch of someone who saw the depth beneath the chaos. You were part of it the moment he chose you, I said, and long before Brenda tried to make you doubt it. We sat together at the small kitchen table, 3 chairs, 2 occupied, letting the daylight fade without turning on the lamps. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like the resting place after a long walk, where your breath evens out and the road behind you no longer feels threatening. Later, when they drove away and the house grew still again, I found myself standing at the sink, staring at the streak of soft gold left on the countertop by the setting sun. It reminded me of something small and forgotten from years ago, a moment when Michael was young and had asked me why grown-ups always look tired. "We're not tired," I'd told him. "We're learning." I hadn't known the truth of that sentence until now, because I wasn't tired anymore. I was awake. And in the quiet of my kitchen, with the evening settling gently over everything I'd fought to protect, I felt the weight of that awakening wrap itself around me. Not heavy, not painful, just honest. If my story touched you, let me know. Sometimes sharing the things we survive reminds us we're not alone in carrying them. And if you've ever been made to doubt your own strength, tell me what brought you back to yourself. I'd like to hear your heart too.